Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Crop. I'm your host Anna Heslop, and today I'm talking to fire environmental researcher Abie Horrocks, and we're going to be talking about soil quality, particularly how to get a good understanding of soil quality on your farm. So welcome, Abie.
Thanks, Anna. Nice to be here.
First of all, I've got kind of one question, which is, what is the soil quality like for New Zealand arable systems?
A wee while ago, we actually got Plant and Food Research to do a benchmarking report for us to try and get a bit of a handle on that. I think it's fair to say that for a lot of the indicators that we looked at, which was aggregate stability, soil carbon and bulk density, in a lot of the regions, the cropping soils were sitting quite comfortably within the sort of recommended ranges. But a strong take home from it was there's also quite a lot of room for improvement. If I'm to speculate, if we're to compare how cropping soils in New Zealand are comparing to overseas, this is speculation, but I would say because we have such diverse cropping rotations, it's a lot of integration with livestock, that we might be faring pretty good on the international stage. But again, we just need to be able to measure and benchmark these things.
Okay, so something I wanted to clarify is what's the difference between soil quality and soil type?
Okay, so in New Zealand, we have incredibly diverse soil types between regions, within regions, and even within paddocks. There's an enormous amount of variability there when we're thinking about those inherent properties like the soil texture, which is the proportion of your sand, silt, and clay. These are out of our control. They're I guess it's things like your parent material, your climate, the biological factors, and also topography, positioning. These things determine these inherent properties with how soil develops. They do characterize the soil. If you imagine a sandy soil, for example, it might be really free draining, and an environmental risk might be nitrate leaching. Compare that to a clay soil, which draining might not be such an issue, but perhaps compaction and pugging might be an issue. So these inherent properties they're out of our control. Soil quality, on the other hand, more speaks to the things that are in our control. So it's about working with what you've got. Definition of soil quality, it's really about looking at the soil's capacity to function for a particular land use. There's all sorts, it's pretty hard to measure directly. So there's a whole raft of parameters around to looking at the biological, physical and chemical functionality of soil. And some of those measurements might be really granular and focused and repeatable and measurable. And some of them, like the VSA or the visual soil assessment that we'll be talking about today, are more subjective, really, really useful, really important, but more of a visual, I guess, subjective assessment of soil quality. And I'll just add there, focusing probably more on the physical and a bit of biological.
So you can't do anything about your soil type because that's been there for 1 million years and it's what you bought when you bought your farm, but you can influence soil quality. Why would you? What does soil quality actually mean and do?
So when you're chasing soil quality, a lot of the time it's around soil structure. And I think the simplest way to explain that would be thinking about the size, structure, strength of your soil aggregates. So soil aggregates are a cluster of the mineral part of the soil, the sand, silt and clay, mixed with organic matter and bound together by a whole lot of glues from organic compounds, and also the fungal microbial part of that is really key as well. But what that means when you have a good structure, you have pore space, you have these solid resilient aggregates and an enormous amount of porosity and pore space in a good soil structure. So if you think about the importance of having that porosity, means you've got airflow, you've got water being able to drain and infiltrate, and the roots. The roots can get down to where they can get access to not only the nutrients but also the oxygen and the water, and having the ability to to penetrate the soil is really important. So I think the take home there would be that soil quality is really well correlated with productivity, and a whole suite of environmental issues that we could go into there as well, but I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. So you talked about the mini soil visual assessment, and I know you are a big fan of that. And that is a way that growers can DIY check soil quality. So two things. First, we're obviously going to talk about what it is and how it works. Now, I'm interested, it's called the mini VSA. Is there a maxi?
Yes, there's a multitude of tools out there in this visual soil assessment space. And what I wanted to do was really just pull out a few, what are the key ones that are most indicative in a cropping situation? That there's, I guess, the three main places I went to regionally and from the UK. In the UK, the Soil Management Initiative has a fantastic cropping visual soil assessment resource. Here in New Zealand, we have Plant and Food Research's soil quality monitoring assessment, and of course, Manaaki Whenua's visual soil assessment field guide developed by Graham Shepherd, which is an incredibly comprehensive resource. So I really just pulled together ones that I thought were going to be most relevant for cropping, quick and easy. And I would absolutely say go deeper, go and look at the more expansive ones if you have the interest and time. But this is a starting point from a cropping lens.
Okay. So how would I do a mini VSA, and
Yes.
when would be a good time to do it?
So when now is a good time, or end of winter, spring? How would you do it? The reason being there's three tests that the mini VSA focuses on. One is around structure and porosity, another one's around turbidity, and the third one's earthworms and earthworm count. So earthworm counts need to be done with this moisture in the soil, and so end of winter, beginning of spring is a really great time before a cultivation event. If the soil is really waterlogged, wait for a few days for it to drain. You don't want the soil to be too wet, but you do need that moisture there to do those earthworm counts. So really there's a pretty simple method to follow around doing that visual assessment. The first one is around just digging that hole and looking at your soil, looking for those aggregates and looking at that soil structure. And it's really important to have a reference point here. So what we're suggesting that you do is dig a hole also in an undisturbed part of the paddock, like a grass verge, somewhere that hasn't had disturbance, that's had a lot of below ground returns of organic matter. So there might be a grass strip, for example. Dig the hole there and have a bit of a comparison between the two. There's a simple methodology around what you're looking for to get a better score and what it would look like to get a lower score. A lot of it really hinges around just like breaking open clods of soil. Can you visually see those aggregates, the crumbs and the texture, or are you looking at a clear, compacted space where there's no airspace, potentially not a lot of root activity? And there's some photos to sort of guide you through that, again, and comparing it to that reference point. So just, the turbidity score is really about just submerging a clod of soil into a column of water and looking to see how it behaves when it's surrounded by water all of a sudden. The soil that has poor structure and not strong aggregates will pretty quickly just dissipate in that soil. It will become turbid and cloudy, and a soil, the verge soil or a soil in the paddock which has really good structure and strong resilient aggregates might not change very much at all, and the water can potentially stay quite clear. So again, there's a score process around what you see in that situation, and that can be quite a striking visual assessment to do to see how it behaves in that water. The third one is just essentially an earthworm count. That there's other biological indicators out there, and I will just plug the Soil Undies podcast that we did here a while back, but that's more a process around looking at microbial activity and decomposition. Earthworms are they're fantastic indicator because their burrowing and feeding activities are really strongly correlated with with nutrient availability and also soil structure formation. They're obviously a really positive indicator. So this is just a simple count and then very simple calculation to get it up to earthworms per metre squared.
Okay. So if I have heard you correctly, that you're going to do three things. You're going to dig a hole.
Yes.
And then from that, you're going to have a look at the soil aggregates.
Yeah.
You're going to put those a hunk, a clod
A
into
hunk,
water,
yeah.
a hunk, and look at turbidity, and then you're going to count earthworms.
Yes.
And each of those three little tests, you're going to get a score.
That's right.
So there's a score sheet.
Yeah.
And what will it tell me at the end once I've done those three tests?
So there's a simple process around to make those scores for each of the tests, and ideally you would do a couple sites per paddock so that you can just get a bit of a handle on variability there around this visual assessment. And then an important point to make is on the scorecard, there's also a place where you can actually make a whole heap of observations, because what does the score tell you? First of all, it's relative. You can't go and compare it with somebody up the road or another farm or another region. It's something for you to track over time trends within a paddock or across the rotation, so that you can, I guess, get your eye in around how the management decisions and your cropping rotation affecting your soil visual condition, because it can change pretty quick, and it's can certainly help you get a handle of where those hotspot areas are. And having a score just makes it, I guess, a bit more easy to manage over time when you come back a year later. What I was getting at before was the place on the score sheet to also just make those observations that don't have a score associated with them. I see them as just as important. This is a place where you might just make an observation around how hard the hole is to dig, where there are mottles in the topsoil, which are indicative of compaction and maybe poor drainage issues, and even just getting your pocket knife out and just stabbing down the side of the hole. How tight does it feel putting the pocket knife in? Looking at if there's something growing, like looking at the roots, how are they getting down? Are they hitting a pan and going off on a side angle, or do you have a good fibrous root system there, which you can look at and see if there's signs of good aggregates clinging onto the roots? And those sorts of observations are gold. So I really suggest that the scoring for those three tests is important, but just categorizing and recording those observations, I think, are equally important. Yeah.
So if, God forbid, I get a low score of my soil quality, what can I do about that? Is that the way things are, or can it be altered?
It certainly can be altered. I think everything needs to be put into the context that across a rotation, there are going to be phases which are depletive to your soil organic matter and to your structure. And then there's phases which are more restorative and they can build that up. So it's not the end of the world. It fluctuates. And so that's why this is really helpful, just to make sure that your fluctuations are either overall being maintained or ideally improving, but certainly being maintained. If there are concerns, then what can you do about that? I think the key things there, organic matter drives a lot of this. So when you think about organic matter, you're thinking about those below ground returns from the roots. That's really key, but also the earthworms and the microbes and all sorts of microbial organisms. They release these compounds which are like glues in a way, and they really serve to bind the soil and to create what we've been talking about, this structure and this good resilient aggregation. So making sure you've got those phases in the rotation where you are returning those below ground returns. Traditionally, in a mixed cropping system, that was pretty easily dealt with, because in that pastoral phase, it's a very restorative phase. There's not a lot of disturbance, a lot of below ground returns of organic matter. But if that's not part of your rotation or is becoming less so, then there's other things that you need to think about. Reducing your fallow periods is a big one. People are using cover crops more and more these days as opportunities to try and add in some of that organic matter and making sure something's growing. Bare ground is your enemy. Working the soil when it's wet, that's something that should absolutely be avoided. Smearing soil is certainly going to really disrupt and compromise that soil structure. Thinking about your tillage operations, maybe there's opportunities to reduce that across the rotation. Thinking about basically just the whole system, and bearing in mind that there's going to be fluctuations in periods where it depletes and then it restores. That's the nature of a cropping system. So trying to squeeze in where you can, make decisions and opportunities to improve those below ground returns and reduce that disturbance.
So obviously the soil quality isn't, from what you've just said, going to be the same across your whole farm because of the rotation. So if you were doing this test a couple of years into a long-term grass seed crop, you would expect the quality in that paddock to be quite different from one that's just come out of a high-yielding cereal or...
Yes, or a potato, for example. That would be what I'd recommend if you're just trying to choose a few paddocks to start off with. Maybe do a paddock which might be in a ryegrass seed crop that you've left in for longer, or a pastoral phase, and compare it to something that you know that's had a bit more of a working. A lot of cereal crops do have quite good below ground returns of organic matter. That's important, but yes, do that comparison on farm. It really can help you also to get your eye in and just really gauge, maybe I need to move that paddock into something a bit more restorative quicker than I had thought, or maybe it's got a bit more life in it left in terms of its resilience and its strength, structural strength. So I think it can help with those sorts of decision making.
So that's a really clear benefit. Are there any other benefits, providing that information around where you are in your cycle? What other benefits might there be to carrying out a VSA?
I think, we're certainly in an age where it's becoming increasingly important to demonstrate that farmers are understanding the risks that their land management decisions are having on a whole suite of environmental issues. So this is a classic example of being able to take your photos. It's something I didn't say before, and I will absolutely push that point. Take some photos of the turbidity test of the structure as you're going through the process, and save them somewhere, save the score sheet somewhere. It's a great thing to be able to pull out in your farm audits, to be able to actually show, yep, I'm getting out there, I'm getting my eye in, I understand what the risks are, and here's some of the mitigations that I'm looking at with regards to soil structure and quality. So that's a biggie. And again, it's really just getting that your eye in and looking out for those hot spots where you might have come up against issues.
So the testing process itself doesn't sound too tricky, but is there somewhere that we can go to find a bit more information about it? And where, the score sheet, for example?
Score sheet. Yes, so our website, if you just type in the resources page, Mini VSA, it will take you to basically the method, which is pretty simple, just a few steps for each of those tests, and also the score sheet where you can keep a good record of the scores and your observations. Also links to the more comprehensive guides that are on the Manaaki Whenua website, and just some other general information around your visual soil assessment. Okay. Also, I will say I would love to hear from people too who are using this, and just to get some feedback, I think. Certainly get in touch with me personally if you have any comments or questions.
Cool. Well, thanks, Abie, because this is something that we get a lot of inquiries about. So it's good to be able to share some more information. Head on to the FAR website, because there is everything that you need to know about the Mini VSA is on there, including a video of Abie in the field showing you how simple it is to do. So thanks very much, Abie, and thank you, listeners. Have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed, or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.